Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this town hall as we get ready to open the university for spring semester. I'm grateful for your time and your effort this morning or this afternoon. As always, this town hall is offered as a place for information and in the spirit of both transparency and trust across our university, particularly among our faculty and staff. For this time together. We also did one of these yesterday for students and had some very, very good questions from our students, and we'll keep these town halls going as needed. We've missed you over spring break. It'll be nice to reconvene, and I'm ready to get going with this spring semester. We also acknowledge the continuing challenges that all and each of us face both personally and professionally in light of this pandemic that somehow seems to be very pervasive in our lives. This will be the fourth semester of opening UNC Asheville with COVID-19 surges in play and mitigation challenges. We've addressed these issues before, and we will do so again, and I'm urging us to stand to the moment, do everything we can to keep one another and each other safe, and move forward with our vital academic and co-curricular mission for the university. I recognize, as you probably do, as do the pundits and those out there reviewing COVID matters in the national news, that the pandemic we've known as COVID-19 is really becoming an ongoing endemic for us as different vaccines and different mitigation strategies are used. It appears that this is not just one virus that's to be avoided, but we're going to have to live with some of this going forward. And so I urge us to embrace the shift to noting that this will likely be a part of our lives and hopefully lesser and lesser impact on the work that we need to do together. I'm urging us once again to have shared resilience, to stand up and stand tall and keep our students center in our work, be it research, be it teaching, be our curricular leadership programs, our athletic program, and so on. Let's keep our students centered, and let's support them in every way that we can, all the while as we support one another. Our mission here is vital and is worthy. We have a responsibility to keep going, obviously as safely as we can muster in this community, but making sure that we are doing our work in service not just to this state, but to our students and our alumni and others. We have prevailed despite these difficult times, as you will recall, in both the spring of 21 and the fall of 21, thanks to the work of all of you and many of those who carried us through that with help from MAHEC, from Mission Hospital, from our sister institutions in the region. We were able to prevail and be the lowest prevalence of COVID of any of the 17 UNC campuses. I'm proud of that, and I believe that we can do that again. Today's sessions will begin with Sarah Broberg and David Weldon discussing topics about COVID itself. They are the two experts on our campus charged to keep us up to date, to keep our data accurate, and to move forward in safe ways altogether. Jay Kutzbeck, then, as Director of Health and Counseling, will discuss topics related to testing, getting booster shots, getting vaccination shots, and the services that we will provide not just to students, but to our faculty and staff. Provost Campbell will then discuss specific topics related to ongoing academic affairs, continuity and value and quality, as we know we already have, but how we do that in the time of COVID. Interim Vice Chancellors for Student Affairs, who are now job sharing the position that Bill Haggard has retired from as of the middle of December, will provide updates for our student life and our student affairs and Highsmith programs. And then Athletic Director Janet Cohn will provide updates from athletics. So thanks again for joining us. Look forward to your questions in the chat. And I now turn it over to Sarah Broberg and David Weldon. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chancellor, and thanks everyone for joining us today. We're excited to start this spring semester. I'll be speaking on behalf of my colleague, David Weldon, but he's on deck if we need anything from him, certainly, just in the interest of streamlining the communication. So thanks for submitting your questions on the Google form. We did receive a question just asking about what's the status of a possible vaccine mandate at UNC Asheville. So as you all are aware, we're part of the UNC system and we follow system guidance, which does not include a vaccine mandate. So right now, current guidance from the UNC system strongly encourages students and employees to get vaccinated, get the COVID-19 booster shot, or get tested regularly. These processes are being handled by the Health and Counseling Center for our students and Human Resources for employees, respectively. So just wanted to provide you with an update there. We did also receive some questions about masks, specifically the KN95 masks. We do have a supply available. As you are aware, those supply are available to our students, our faculty, and our staff. At the Highsmith welcome desk, the front desk there, also in Governor's Hall and in Brown Hall, and then the surgical masks are available in the classrooms. Just a reminder that the KN95 masks and the surgical masks are one-use only masks, so they are not meant to be laundered or reused. Once you use them, then they are to be discarded. So also a reminder that the UNC Asheville cloth masks that are provided for everyone free of charge do meet the CDC guidelines for masks, which have 2 or more layers of washable, breathable fabric. They're to be worn completely covering your mouth and your nose in order to prevent no air from leaking from the top of the mask. So that's just an update on the KN95 masks that are available to our campus community. There was also a question just asking again about disciplinary actions if anyone ignores mask protocols. So as we've repeated, regularly over the course of the pandemic, if someone is not wearing a face covering, the first step would be point out to them that face coverings are available, remind them that properly wearing a face mask is required. If they refuse, this is in a classroom setting, you can ask them to leave. If they refuse to leave and all other options have been exhausted, then the class or the meeting could be canceled. And then a student should be reported to the Dean of Students and the appropriate disciplinary process, and employees would be reported to Human Resources. The last question that came up was specifically asking about the status of the air filtration systems in our classrooms, in our buildings. And so this is a very long, detailed answer. And so in sort of the interest of time and to lend this to the experts, I'm actually going to just drop the response in the chat that links to the FAQ on coronavirus.unca.edu that provides a very comprehensive overview about the air filtration systems in classrooms and buildings. So with that, I will now pass the proverbial mic over to my colleague, Jay Kutzbeck.
Happy New Year, everybody, and thanks for coming today. We have been working very hard to get us ready for the students' return and the employees' return. And I'm just going to have 2 questions, and then I'm just going to talk a little just briefly about testing. The first question that came in is, if I'm in contact with somebody with a positive case, what should I do? And I have to say, it's gotten very complicated over the course of the last 10 days. So for me to go through the detail of the specifics of that, I think would be very confusing. I think marketing and communications have put a flow chart together, and I think that's probably your best source. I also, when I'm done, I'll put a link to the CDC page, which also I think does a good job at illustrating what the requirements are. But basically, some summary points are that the CDC considers folks who have their full series of vaccines and their booster as fully vaccinated folks. And so if you are a fully vaccinated folks, meaning you've had your booster, then you just really need to wear a mask and monitor your symptoms. You do not have to isolate or quarantine. So that's one category of folks. If you haven't had your full series of vaccines, or if you have not had your booster, then you do have to quarantine for a period of 5 days in your home, and then wear a mask for another 5 days. Now, obviously, if you develop symptoms, you should have a test, and the isolation periods may change if it comes positive. But I think the important takeaway is fully vaccinated folks are folks that have had 2 doses of Pfizer, Moderna, and the booster, or a single dose of J&J and the booster. If you are one of those folks, you do not have to quarantine if you come in contact with somebody. Everyone else will have to do that. And keep in mind, this is evolving. I mean, I got a note about this at 4:30 yesterday. So it is changing, but look at that flow sheet, and I'm going to put a link here in the chat that will also help you. The second question, our isolation and quarantine procedures on campus will be the same as they were last semester. We have spaces designated for students who live on campus, and we provide them meals and support while they're in those spaces. Students who live off campus either will isolate in their apartments or will go home to where they live with their folks. Most off-campus students stay in Asheville and isolate in their own apartments. So I think those were, testing. So we're going to expand our testing capabilities this semester. Highsmith Room 125 is going to be our sort of on-campus testing center. Employees, hopefully they're over there right now, meeting the Senesco labs, will be able to be tested on Tuesdays and Thursdays from noon to 2 o'clock. And we will have both the saliva and the nasal swab available to employees. And those are both PCR tests. Students will have the ability to be tested opportunity every day, Monday through Friday, at a schedule that will just stagger. Some are earlier in the afternoon, some are later in the afternoons, but that will also be available to students. And we expect that to continue at least through February. We'll see how the pandemic plays out. So we will have testing capabilities. Keep in mind the health and counseling resources are mainly for students who have symptoms and are sick or who have very significant exposures. Those are the folks we need to be treating here at the Health and Counseling Center.
Jay, please report about testing, not just testing, but the vaccine opportunities that you intend to make available to our campus community, please.
Yes. For those that need the booster or the vaccine, there are two possibilities here. David Weldon is working on setting up those sites similar that we had last semester at the Reuters Center through FEMA. If that doesn't work itself out, then we will work with our health department and MAHEC, and we will be offering vaccine and booster events here on campus for folks.
So I think that's up to me now. And I'll begin with a question that we got. What is the rationale for the week of remote instruction? And I think this also came up in the chat. Will we consider an extension to remote instruction, particularly if COVID cases rise? So the temporary shift to remote is really designed to help us deal with this present COVID Omicron uptick in about 3 ways. First, we hope that students will naturally return to campus and over a period of time and help us ease the flow of traffic back onto campus. This will help us to deliver on some of the things that Jay just spoke about, vaccinations, testing, and some of those other things. We also expect that this will give us a better understanding of what to expect in our community once we bring people back to campus. And we want to we're constantly making sure that we're aligning our response to what we're seeing in our community and to do so as effectively as possible. So that's the second reason. And then finally, we hope that the remote instruction, the week of remote instruction, will help limit the need for special accommodations in classes over this first week, over this first period where both in our region and as we bring folks back to campus, we know that we're going to have the most careful tracking and management of COVID. And so as we bring folks to campus, we'll ease in and hopefully be able to align responses and limit the special accommodations necessary. We hope that this gives us some time to learn, to assess how to best respond to this particular instance of COVID uptick. One of the important questions that I said here is that, what might prompt us to extend the remote instruction? What are we looking for? I guess I want to pause here and say, and this relates to some of you may have already seen some of the conversations that are going on in the academic forum. It's a hard thing to say, but I think we are aware, all of us are aware, that we are moving from what is a pandemic to what will be endemic. And I think we've already said that. We see it in the news. We are seeing that Omicron is more contagious. It has a shorter infectious stage, but generally has produced milder symptoms and reactions, particularly for those who are fully vaccinated. One of the reasons why it's incredibly important to be fully vaccinated, which most often means having a booster. This means that we're going to be seeing, even with more vaccinations and more testing, we're going to be seeing more cases, but those cases are likely to have milder and shorter quarantine times. So we're expecting this. We still maintain a strategy that prioritizes the mitigation of spread. And that's what all of our practices, all of our protocols are designed to do, to mitigate the spread, to keep us from having, as a community, having COVID spread throughout. But we are also needing to shift and dedicate more energies to managing through a greater number of cases. Both are true. This means that as we evaluate what's happening, we'll need to assess both the number of cases that we're seeing and what's going on with the intensity of cases. So there are conditions that would perhaps have us extending this remote instruction, but I'm not sure that I can articulate clearly what those are. We're looking and assessing, we're going to be assessing every single day. But I want to make very clear that we do expect to be able to be back in person on January 18th. We think that is the best for our students. We think that as we learn how to accommodate things through this easing back of folks in this first week, we'll be able to align our practices and have a very healthy, safe community here on campus. Again, if we, after looking at things, assess something and say, you know what, this may change, we are of course prepared to make those decisions. But we do right now anticipate that we will start back in person on January 18th in person instruction. What COVID-19 safety measures are in place for the classroom this semester has been a question asked. I would say three things to that. First, we are incredibly grateful in large measure to all of the hard work that all of you have done and all of the work that folks have put into adhering to our protocols, that we ended the last semester with no known instances of workplace transmission among employees or of classroom transmission among students and faculty. Of course, we had cases, as people are well aware, but those cases were traced back, as far as we know, to outside of workplace and classroom incidences. So we do know that our practices, masking protocols, daily symptom checking, surveillance testing, limiting of larger gatherings, except with stronger protocols, cleaning practices, the folks that are cleaning our buildings, our spaces, all of those efforts have been incredibly effective. We plan on continuing those practices throughout this semester. We're always going to be monitoring CDC, North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, the UNC system recommendations, all of those, and updating our practices as soon as possible, as soon as there is new information. Second, I'm grateful to Keith Crumpy especially, but certainly those in campus operations, facilities, registrar's office, and for several others who did some work over the break to ensure that classrooms and enrollments are matched as best as possible. So the classroom desks and all of the kind of situated of the hardware in the classrooms so that we have the proper distancing for classrooms. In some cases, we've been contacted by students who are still concerned, particularly those that are in larger sections that have multiple sections of courses. There are often classes at not exactly the most desirable time of 8 o'clock, but we're encouraging students that if you want to help to alleviate some of this, transferring to a class that is offered at 8 o'clock is often a good option. There are other things that we're doing. We stand ready to try to respond to anything that's happening with a particular classroom situation that doesn't feel right. But again, I want to thank Keith Crumpy and he and his team and the registrar's team for really thinking about those classroom dynamics for this semester. And then finally, I'm asking faculty this semester to really exercise fixed seating throughout the course of the semester. So to ask students to stay in the same seats to the fullest extent possible, so that we can aid our contact tracing and other mitigation measures throughout the course of the semester. So if folks could adhere to that, that would be a great help to those of us or those who are needing to do the contact tracing in particular. Do we still have student health ambassadors this semester, and can they speak to our classes? Yes, we do still have student health ambassadors. Please contact Jordan Perry if you want to have them speak to your class. I also want to note that the faculty should have received recently an email from Regina Kreiser about an initiative that we're piloting, the course ambassadors. These are upper level students who are assigned to a specific course to help support both the faculty member and students in that course. If you want to hear more about that program, please look for that email and please be in touch with Regina about details. And then finally, what are the contingency plans for covering courses as faculty test positive or need to isolate or become ill during the course of the semester? I am asking all departments. This is something that we did at one key moment earlier, but I want to be very explicit here about this. We're asking all departments to develop their own contingency plans for potential short-term absences. This is not unlike something that you've all done all the time, done many times before for things outside of COVID even. This may include having faculty, a single faculty member teach remotely, asking a colleague to cover class, providing an asynchronous option for a class or two. These are all the usual options that I know everyone here is very familiar with and have had to engage at one time or another. We absolutely do not want anyone coming to engage students or each other if you have symptoms, test positive, or exposed to someone who tests positive. We absolutely want you to stay away and develop an alternative option. We don't want you on the campus in those circumstances. But as I've said just a moment ago, we really do expect to see shorter quarantine times. The CDC has actually already adopted shorter quarantine times and milder cases for those who do get COVID. Again, ideally, everyone is fully vaccinated and making that easier to be the case. And so that we hope that each faculty member and each department can develop contingency plans that will be sufficient for almost all of these situations, that in fact there will be short-term situations at worst. However, we know that there is always the possibility for some greater impact in some instances. And like I said, through whether it's COVID or some other situation, we know that each department needs to handle this maybe slightly differently. We'll have different options. Want departments to be thinking about this. I don't have a universal answer for all situations, but I am ready, we are ready to work with faculty and departments in ways that are necessary to resolve that. Let me again say that I acknowledge just how hard this is, both for you and for our students. We're constantly thinking about what ifs and having to pivot. We've been doing so for 2 years now with new concerns that crop up seemingly at the start of every semester. And I know what a toll that has taken. We're working hard really now to develop moments through the semester that we can have that can help us, faculty, staff, and students, all of us as a community, to catch our breath, to take care of our mental and emotional well-being as we work through all of this. I'm going to ask that you just look for more on this soon. We know just acknowledging it isn't enough, but we're looking for ways that we can help really support our community in the fullest way possible. Our greatest imperative is to deliver on student success. And we must ensure that students know that we're here able to help them grow and develop, and that we care about their progress. But I also know that we can't ask that of you unless we're likewise supporting and caring for each of you. So please look for more on initiatives that we're going to be trying to do to make sure that we are, as a community, just taking care of ourselves, that we are monitoring our own mental health as we try to provide and deliver on our mission to our students. So with that, I think I will turn it over to Nancy and Melanie.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here today and for everything that you do to contribute to the success of our community. For Student Affairs, we just have a couple of questions that I would like to answer. The first one is, when will our students be back in the residence halls? And we actually are having students come back to the residence halls this weekend, starting even today. This is a really safe place for many of our students, and they feel as though being here on campus is of their best interest. And so having them here, even though we're going to have a week of remote instruction, is going to be the best circumstance for many of those students. They must provide a negative COVID-19 test within 72 hours of their arrival to campus in order to have access to our residence halls, but once they meet those expectations, they will be allowed back. And we anticipate a great many of our students will return to our residence halls, if not this weekend, the remainder of the coming week. And we fully anticipate having our residence halls be as full as possible by the 18th of January. The second question is related to programmatic aspects of what will we be doing as it relates to welcome back events for our students as they come back to campus. And we anticipate for next week that we'll be predominantly virtual in our learning opportunities in Student Affairs for our campus students who are here. Once we return to in-person learning on January 18th, we are going to be doing a balance of both in-person and virtual options so that we can meet the needs of the majority of our students. For those who would prefer a more online learning opportunity, we'll have those options available. But for those who would really prefer an in-person opportunity, we'll be doing that in predominantly smaller gatherings. So those are the questions that we had in Student Affairs. I want to thank you for providing those questions to us. And now I would like to turn things over to our Athletic Director, Janet Cohn.
Thank you, Melanie. Welcome back, everybody. I want to give a brief update of where we are in athletics. As many of you know, our winter sports actually compete over the holiday break. They do take a couple of days off for the Christmas to celebrate with their families. We began bringing back the men's and women's basketball came back on December the 26th. We brought our women's swimming team back. We are have updated protocols from the Big South, the NCAA, and obviously the CDC. So we are transitioning all the student athletes back. All have been asked to get a negative test, whether they live on campus or off campus. And then we are actually testing them once they get here to see where they all are. And by the way, we are competing. And if you missed the Bulldogs beat Campbell last night on ESPN Plus, so things are happening. The other thing we are doing as far as our protocols, we have told all of our student athletes, at least during the next couple of weeks, while this is a little more challenging, we will not have spectators at home events until we begin in-person classes. So there'll be fewer people coming on campus to kind of help with the transition. We are doing, actually, I just got off of Zoom. We're Zooming with each team and their coaches, going over the protocols. Tonight at 6 o'clock, we'll Zoom with any of the parents and guardians that want updates about our campus, doing everything we can to promote what we do as a university. And what we do as a university is we care about our students and our student athletes and reassuring them that we're going to find a way through this. And we're just excited to be back. And the rest of our student athletes will actually have the track. We'll be working with them tomorrow, testing them. So Stay tuned for more. It'll be stop and start for a little while, but we'll get through it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Janet. Thanks, colleagues. So we've reached the Q&A section of our town hall here. And there are two questions related to masks that I will hand over to my colleague, David Weldon. The first one is asking about the KN95 masks that seem to only fit smaller faces. And so would it be possible to get mask KN95s that fit larger faces? And then the other question related to the KN95s is, can we require that students wear KN95s in class and not something else? So I'll maybe pass it to David, and then Provost, you might want to add on to that as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. As far as the size of the KN95s, they're usually based on the manufacturer that sends them. They're a one size more or less fits all, just like with the surgical mask. They're not like the N95s that we actually fit test. We will look into trying to find other sources that we can to get a larger mask. We do have two types of KN95s now. One is a little more suited for a more full face like me. And I do use those and they do work. As far as moving to KN95s in the classroom, as we have from the very start, we've always followed the direction of the CDC, and the masks that we're using meet that criteria, whether it's the cloth mask, the surgical mask, or the KN95s. One of the issues that we have that people do not remember when they're talking about masks, that the surgical mask and the KN95s are one-use masks. They would have to be picked up and used and then disposed of when they leave the classroom. If they're picked up and then transported, depending on how they transport it, they can degrade that mask en route to the class, whether they stuff it in a book bag or whatever they do with them. So that's one of the reasons we don't stipulate the type of mask, as long as they meet the guidance from the CDC.
Thank you, David. We have a question here. Do all employees, regardless of vaccine status, have to be tested before returning to campus next week? I think we're going to take that one. And I think the communication, Chancellor, did you want to, I see you're unmuted yourself there.
Yeah, no, we are not requiring that everyone be vaccinated. We are urging everyone to be vaccinated, but we are not mandating that. The UNC system protocols prohibit us from exercising that as a mandate. But I feel morally bound to say it's important that all of us make our choices, but consider getting vaccinated, both vaccines plus the booster, when you are eligible and in the timing that suits you. We will make those readily available on campus.
Thank you, Chancellor. And I apologize if I maybe misspoke. The question was actually about testing, not vaccines, if we're requiring testing for all employees, regardless of their vaccination status. And so I think the answer to that question is that yes, sorry, Joanne. Yes, that's exactly right. So thank you for the clarification. So we're not requiring that all employees, regardless of vaccination status, get tested before they come back to campus. If you're symptomatic, you absolutely should go contact your health provider and get tested. And then we do have the surveillance testing available on our campus as communicated every Thursday and Tuesday from 12 to 2 p.m. In Highsmith 125 for those who choose to get tested or who have been in contact with someone who has been who has tested positive. So I hope that clarifies things for you. Are there any additional questions? I think we've been doing a good job of getting on top of those questions in the chat, but if there are any that we haven't addressed, I've been trying to track them. Well, if there are no further questions, then I might just pass the mic over to Chancellor Cable to maybe give us some closing remarks.
A few more thoughts about COVID and then a comment about our university-wide situation and opportunities. I think Provost Campbell said this well. This Omicron virus variant is less virulent, is more virulent and more contagious, but it is less severe. The chancellors of all the 17 institutions have been in regular contact with the epidemiologist at UNC Chapel Hill, notably Dr. Wesley Burke. And he has told us a couple of things that may be important for us to keep in mind. One is that generally, and there are undoubtedly exceptions, but the early data on Omicron indicates that a person is contagious for up to 3 days, after which their ability to be contagious and spread the variant virus drops off precipitously. That's an important piece for us to understand. Similarly, as you know, Omicron is nationwide, virulent, widely contagious, bringing lots of folks to their knees in terms of testing and testing capabilities. But it is, though it's leading to hospitalizations of pediatric and some older individuals, it is rising very quickly. It is expected, according to Dr. Birx, to peak the third or fourth week of January. And then around the first 2 weeks of February, it is likely to tail off precipitously and decline about as sharply as it rose over these last 2 weeks. And so I encourage us to keep the macro picture in play and to continue to stay informed about national trends around this variant and keep those in mind as we open the institution for our spring semester. I also want to note that these protocols that we've adopted and put in place have really come from extensive briefings from folks like Dr. Birx, but also my work with chancellors in the area, the expertise of some of our medical school colleagues in the state. And so these were developed as a part of working with other higher education colleagues. We have tried to tailor things to UNC Asheville, like, for example, the opportunity that we received permission to do for 1 week of allowing us to gather more slowly to try to mitigate the virus by having an academic online option or an online expectation for the first week. We will continue to be in consultation with those folks and continue to monitor these trends and rely on the advice of experts. I feel responsible to mention that, oddly, even ironically, we are at this very important point in our history as a university. Most of you know, for the last 2.5, almost 3 years, we've been working to craft, with input from all campus constituencies, an advocacy for ourselves that we've called the Revitalization Program for UNC Asheville. Oddly enough, we've been given some funding that we don't know when that's coming, but we hope early in the second semester, to do the things that we said we would do to strengthen the fiscal capacity of UNC Asheville, to evolve and innovate our academic programs, building on the strength of all of our humanities, sciences, social sciences. We will be given some money to assist us with retention, one of our beleaguering problems. We'll be given some funding to help us support reestablishing market demand in our enrollment and admission processes, and some help in financial aid. So it is a moment of significant importance for UNC Asheville, despite COVID, and even within operating protocols about COVID, that we must stay strong, resilient, certainly giving each other grace and kindness and humane understanding. But I'm urging us, as we can, and certainly as COVID Omicron recedes, I hope quickly in the month of February, we must proceed with courage, commitment to our future, and the strength that we know and attention this institution deserves with this new funding to make us a stronger, better place for everyone here, faculty and staff for sure, but also for our students and for those who care deeply about the institution, like our alumni, like our trustees, among others. So let's remember our moment has come, And despite the scourge of COVID, we will prevail. We will move forward. And I'm urging us all and each to find a way to contribute to this moment to move the institution forward, despite this COVID start. I'm grateful to all of you and have been for all these tough nearly 2 years of COVID. And I know that we can do well the work that we do by remaining safe, by remaining healthy, by supporting each other, by abiding the protocols that have been put in place through advice from real experts and proven science. So let's get going with spring semester. Let's keep each other in our thoughts and our hopes for a good semester moving forward as a team of people at UNC Asheville. And let's keep putting our students' educational progress at the center of all that we do. Thank you, Sarah, for hosting this town hall. Thanks for everybody who's come on board today to participate in this conversation. And we will do more town halls in the weeks to come. We will also reinstitute our common grounds conversations about budget and planning and finance, about admissions and financial aid work, about the role of philanthropy and the work of the campaign and its current, at least initial results. So we'll keep in touch with each other as we move forward. Thank you, everyone. I'm grateful to each and every one of you.